34 minutes past the hour. It is indeed the Jeff Santos Show that you're tuned into. It is time on this Tuesday to go west, young man, and to find some solace in the great Pacific Northwest, in the great city of Seattle, where we find our journalist of great credibility and great hard work, doing it every day. Find him on Twitter. Mark Taylor-Canfield is our guest. He comes to us from the great city of Seattle. How you doing, Mark?
Good, Jeff. It's been a busy week. The Seattle Star is back, a famous newspaper in Seattle that was published from 1899 to 1947 is back. So wow. I'm actually writing film reviews for them. And then also I just wrote an article at the Capitol Hill Times about Seattle's state of emergency in regards to the homeless situation. So been a very busy week. Plus we had an anti-fascist march in Seattle on the 6th on Saturday. So busy week. Definitely.
Now, is this Star just online or is it actual physical paper?
It is only online at this point. It's gone the way of the Seattle Post Intelligencer, which doesn't actually have a hard copy anymore. But the Seattle Times and the Seattle PI used to have a joint ownership. And Frank Blethen is actually the owner-publisher of the Seattle Times. That agreement, they broke up, and the Seattle PI went online, and so that's what the Seattle Star is. And it's just local writers. Omar Wiley is the publisher, editor, and local folks like been writing, all sorts of very sort of caustic, satirical, and, very independent journalism. So it's a good source for that kind of information.
That's fantastic. Well, I would tell you, it is great to hear that there are more journalistic outlets, whether they are print, radio, or TV, that are doing good journalism, which you obviously are part of. So congrats on that. I want to get your film idea on the movie I saw over the weekend, which I thought was fantastic. She-Ra with Spike Lee's movie. If you haven't seen it yet, check it out. It's okay. A great, great film. But you talked about something that to me is very scary, and in a progressive area like Puget Sound, like Seattle is, to have a potential Nazi rally that the anti-Nazi rally was about. Give us a little background here, because you hear about these things time to time in other parts of the country, but I just wouldn't expect it in a place like Seattle. Give us some background.
So people started printing a poster saying we need to protect the community because apparently there were some bands that were going to be playing in the Ballard neighborhood of Seattle who were part of these neo-Nazi groups. And somebody had posted on one of those websites that they were going to head to the neighborhood, which is mostly LGBT, the gay community in Seattle. So a lot of people hit the streets. A lot of people, even Black Lives Matter folks, were out in the streets as well because they wanted to counter, these ideas of racism. So the truth is, Jeff, that it was an internet rumor that the community reacted to, came together in a very strong way. That 500 people gathered at Cal Anderson Park and marched. And in reality, the small group of people who showed up that, might have been shouting racial epithets or something were very small. And so it didn't turn out to be the confrontation that people were worried about. It mainly turned into sort of a victory celebration for the community and really brought the community together in a sense of pride and just to say no to these kinds of ideas. It's not very popular in Seattle, of course. It is a very progressive place. And so people take offense to anybody who might be discriminating or making threats toward ethnic communities. It's just something that's not very acceptable in the city of Seattle. So the good news is that nothing bad happened. Just a lot of people marched. And in reality, it was the anti-Nazi march that was eventually broken up by police. They were out in the streets, so they definitely needed a big show against fascism. Some folks were calling it an anti-fascist march, which does bring us to another subject, which you and I talked about off the air. This Huffington Post article talking about how there have been some neo-Nazi groups that have supported Donald Trump, especially his stance on immigration. Comments lately have also been discredited by some folks in his own party. In fact, some pretty powerful members of the Republican Party are saying that, he does not represent what they're about. It is kind of shocking to a lot of people to learn that Donald Trump does receive support from at least a few neo-Nazi groups. And Huffington Post wrote about that. And so people have been reading that article and commenting online about it. It's by Matt Ferner, who's the author of that article. But it's definitely been an issue that has made people wonder. There was another Daily Kos article, actually, that's being promoted today, too, which directly confronts what the author is saying are fascist elements in our society. So it lays it out very forthright and clearly about what fascism is about and why people all over Europe had traditionally resisted it. And so any semblance of that kind of thing in the United States often does result in large demonstrations and counter rallies, which is what happened here in Seattle over the weekend.
Talking with our good friend Mark Taylor-Canfield in Seattle, a great journalist that he is, talking about all these issues. I want to ask you about this, though. And I think that the idea of people allowing Trump to continue to do this, there's been a lot of backlash, thankfully. But the fact the whole Republican Party have talked about the issue of the two individuals in San Bernardino on Pacific Coast, that they've made them out to be, a Bonnie and Clyde that has connections right to the top of ISIL or ISIS or Al-Qaeda. That there is this whole idea that we have to fear people who look differently than us, that have a different religion than us. How much of that has angered and has activated the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, or for that matter, progressives in general?
Well, there's always been a pretty big dividing line here, especially between the east side of the state and the west side of the state. I always tell people that there is no Republican Party headquarters in Seattle. I think it's considered occupied territory to most Republicans. So I think part of the issue here is that you have presidential candidates for one of the two most powerful political parties in the United States, and almost all of the Republican candidates, or potentially all of them, from what I've been able to tell, are approaching immigration from this attitude that, we just need to wall off the country and hold up. In the minds of a lot of progressive folks, that is not solving any problems. In fact, it's just, a lot of what times making innocent victims out of immigrants, people trying to, move to this country. I know in our state, the governor, Jay Inslee, has said that he supports Syrian refugees moving to our state, so he's not one of the governors who's taking that stance.
Well, that's good. That's a good sign, and we'll come back and talk more about this with our good friend Mark Taylor-Canfield. It's a Jeff Santos Show. It is indeed the Jeff Santos Show. We're talking with our good friend Mark Taylor-Canfield, great journalist in the Pacific Northwest, based in Seattle. And one of the things that we also talked about off air today, Mark, and our usual conversation we have before the show, is the issue of gun safety and gun control, and how this plays into what we have been talking about And I really believe that this is an issue that connects the dots. If you want to look at what happened in San Bernardino, it may very well have been terrorism that motivated these folks, but the fact that they could have assault weapons that we've already banned before, from 94 to 2004 with Dianne Feinstein and Bill Clinton. But the fact is that, we're the only country in the world that has the access to these sort of weapons. It's insane, and something has to change soon. I know you have some folks that are looking at this issue. What's going on in Seattle on this issue?
Well, the group Ceasefire has always been pretty prominent in Seattle on this issue, and within the last decade, we had a shooting in Seattle at the local Jewish community center. So it's an issue. We've also had some school shootings in Washington State. What was interesting to me is that today also Rolling Stone has an article out about the death of John Lennon. This is the anniversary of his death at the hands of Mark David Chapman 35 years ago. And according to Rolling Stone, since John Lennon was killed, 1.15 million Americans have been killed by guns. So, I mean, that sounds like a major war. I really want to hear what the NRA organizers have to say about those kinds of statistics. But that's something that a lot of people have been talking about. There was also a shooting in San Francisco. Mario Wood's video that was filmed by an eyewitness has gone viral on YouTube and other places. So that's been an issue also that people have been talking about in Seattle. So on the anniversary of John Lennon's death, here we are facing this same issue that caused such a tragedy and plagued a lot of people at that time. A lot of people can remember that day that John Lennon was shot, just like they can remember other major points in American history. So I think the Rolling Stone article has really stirred up a lot of discussion. And there is a post by Yoko Ono, which shows the sunglasses that John wore, and they still have his blood on them. And it says over 1,100,000 people have been killed by guns in the USA since John Lennon was shot and killed on December 8th, 1980. So that's what Yoko Ono is tweeting today. And that's under a hashtag, by the way, on Twitter called Stop Gun Violence. We've talked before about how Washington State has a lot of hunters, and there's actually a lot of very responsible gun owners in the state. I think it's more of a concern in the cities. People who live out in rural areas and hunt and have a tradition of that usually are very careful about how they use their weapons. I'm not sure how the country's going to deal with this issue, but it's obviously not going away. And there are more and more news stories popping up all the time. I've also talked about how Seattle had a gun buyback program that the Seattle Police Department put together, and they immediately received a lot of weapons, including a rocket launcher tube. The rocket was not included, but they were pretty surprised some things, some of the things that they received. But in Seattle, people were more than willing to trade their old rusty rifle in for a $200 gift certificate or something. So it was quite a successful program here. But there's also been an increase in gun violence in Seattle, and there have been some shootings even recently in several neighborhoods in the Seattle area that have really concerned people because the rate of crime here has always been traditionally pretty low compared to other cities around the country. But there's a new influx, a huge IT gold rush going on. A lot of people are moving here from other parts of the country and other parts of the world. So culture is changing, and as a result of that, the crime rate, unfortunately, is going up as well. And it has had a lot to do with gun violence. So it's a discussion that's on everybody's mind in Seattle and has been for a long time. And then also the issue of police accountability, because this situation in San Francisco, I know that KQED, I was following this earlier today, are disputing some of the statements that the San Francisco police chief has made about the video and what was happening in that video. So they have actually directly challenged her on that issue. So we'll see where that goes. But more people are going to be marching in San Francisco, it looks like, on this issue of police accountability and issues of racism and Black Lives Matter. This whole movement that's spread across the country doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon.
It's a sad, sad state of affairs. But the fact is that no other country in the world that's a first world nation. You know, obviously places that are at war now and Central Africa and so forth. But no first world nation has this kind of ability to buy an assault weapon in the first world nations of this world. It's outrageous. And somehow the American people electing political figures who allow this to go on have to stop it. And you go right back to the whole gerrymandering case in the House, when even though you get more votes for other members of Congress, you can't remove some of the conservatives who have been locked in by the Republicans who have taken over the states in this country. And it's real tragic. Just one thing before you roll with us. Anything new on the ways to pay for high school and elementary school, public schools, that is, in Washington State?
Well, everybody's getting in on the act, Jeff, and there is a good news story, so it would be nice to leave on that. And that is that the Seattle City Council voted $1 million to pass out free Metro bus passes to high school and middle school students in Seattle for low-income students. But the group that's really heading that, a group of activists who've been pushing for this for a long time, wants to expand that program to involve more children.
Let's expand it. We'll talk to you next week. All the best.